Turn to the teacher. Turn to the teacher. Turn to the teacher. Turn to the teacher. Turn to the teacher.
And welcome back. I'm Mike with the Turntable Teachers, and class is officially back in session. And we are here for another guest speaker episode. And today I am joined by a very special guest. I have the lovely Jasmine Ortiz joining the show today. Thank you so much, Jasmine, for being here. This is an honor having you on the show. How you been? How you doing? How's things?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for having me on. It's been a long Monday so far, but we're getting through the day, getting through the rest of the week, hopefully. Just working on school stuff, working on music. Busy.
Yeah, you do quite a bit. We're very similar in a lot of ways because you definitely are able to juggle a lot of different things at once, for sure. Yeah, that's a good place to start. I guess we kind of kick off where we were left off off air. We were talking a lot about school and stuff. So you're a student at the University of Miami, specifically the Frost School of Music. Is that correct?
Yeah, I am a junior, and I study musicianship, artistry development, entrepreneurship, minors in political science, songwriting, and music business. I definitely have a lot going on at once, but totally. I love it here. I really decided to come to UM because it felt like home when I came to visit for my audition, and they really decided to kind of cater the curriculum for me. So I actually got to build my own major and incorporate different aspects of other majors into what I study. So instead of just focusing on music business or production or performance or songwriting, I get to kind of do all of it.
That's awesome. And I think that's a good thing too, because it'll leave you with a lot of different options once you're done, right? I mean, you'll have kind of some different directions you can go in. So that's awesome. Which part of it for you, I guess my first question will be, which part for you is the most passionate at this point? Like out of all the laundry list of things that you're doing at school, what's the one what you think right now? Because you are, of course, a junior, so you're probably thinking a little bit ahead of okay, got about a year left. Like, what direction do you maybe see yourself going in about a year?
I definitely feel the most passionate about my songwriting. So I am also obviously an artist, and I'm really passionate about being a recording artist and performer. So that's something that goes hand in hand for me, because I find it so much more rewarding when I do get to write my own songs and perform them and just kind of see the reaction to them. Definitely. So I absolutely love songwriting, and I want to write for other people as well as myself, because I've really been exploring my skills in production, in collaborating, in writing for other topics, other genres. So that's something that I'm super passionate about working on more.
Awesome. And which part has been the most challenging for you to kind of, or the most difficult for you to kind of to grasp onto?
I feel like the music business classes have been, a lot of them have felt like second nature to me, because I've been around the industry for so long, and my parents were both in the industry. So I kind of had that secondhand knowledge already, just from childhood, hearing them on phone calls, hearing them discuss certain topics. So I had all of that baseline, but really getting into the nitty-gritty of what a performance budget entails, what an album budget entails, what copyright law actually is on paper, how to deal with music business negotiations and contracts, all of those things, like the nitty-gritty of it, above kind of the general consensus that I understood, have been challenging, just to kind of learn the specific laws, the codes, the cases. So that's been really interesting, because I'm also kind of politically engaged on campus and interested in law and politics. So having that kind of coincide with music business has been interesting. Awesome.
Don't stop exploring the passions. I think that's a good advice for anybody to hear, that you can do multiple things at once. It's not until you're forced to make a decision, of course, but which won't happen for a while, which is, I'm still doing that. I haven't made a decision myself. So, but that's awesome that you're kind of it seems like you're just ingratiating yourself into the scene there and really just making your presence known on campus and through so many different outlets. And we were talking a little bit off air too about you getting involved in teaching yourself, which is awesome. Turntable Teachers, you're in the right place. We had a conversation about education and just the educational system, and how not always the high school system necessarily I think drives students in the right direction a lot of the times, right? So for you, like, what have you noticed in your transition, not only as a student, but now as almost being an educator yourself in a way?
Yeah, it's interesting for me to realize, I guess, the gaps in my own education and where I would have wanted to have more information off the bat. And as a mentor, as an educator, because I pretty much teach not only, I'll get into what I teach in a minute, but I also act as a mentor for Frost School of Music, and I kind of mentor freshmen, sophomores, underclassmen who are looking to maximize their education at the school, and I kind of provide them with the insight of things I wish I had learned sooner, maybe some classes to avoid, things here and there that I wish I had someone to kind of tap me on the shoulder and be like, hey, this is my advice. I think it's interesting because it gives you an entirely different perspective. And also allows you to dig into the information even more. I feel like as someone coming from a teaching perspective, I have an even better knowledge now of the things that I'm teaching than before when I was just learning them. So obviously it makes sense, but it's something that you don't really realize until you're, involved in it yourself.
Exactly, because you have to sort of like exactly what you said. It's a different knowledge and different understanding when you not only have to understand that like specific subject or whatever it is you're going to teach, but how do you like actually have it reach other people so they understand it as well? It's a concept that a lot of people get go in education don't think about as much. They're like, oh, I'm passionate about this subject, I can teach it, and that's great. Like that is the first step when you're actually educating others, is that passion, that place of, that, like I said, that care of what you're teaching. But you also, there's the sort of other skill of relaying it to other people, and that can be difficult. It's not an easy process to sort of manage.
Absolutely. I mean, there's entire master's programs dedicated to pedagogy, which is literally just the study of how to teach.
I just finished one.
So, that's something that can be a huge learning curve for someone like me who had no, prior experience or no knowledge that I would even be interested in teaching at some point, to kind of get through that. I actually currently work for a company called Best Delegate with the Model United Nations Institute, and what they do is teach kids in middle and high school how to debate similar to the United Nations, how to do research on foreign policy, how to debate and write policy papers from the perspective of different countries or sometimes characters as well. So that's something I've really enjoyed doing. I've been a competitive delegate on my own college Model UN team for 3 years. So I've won awards at Harvard, at Columbia, at UChicago. That's been something that's really enriched my college experience. And now getting to kind of pass that information on has been extremely rewarding for me, because I see these kids, they're 10, 11, 12 years old, and they're tackling these incredibly complex issues, like, I mean, insane things like nuclear disarmament or gender and sexuality-based violence in foreign countries, like things that a normal 12-year-old is not even comprehending or thinking about. And they're just going above and beyond my expectations. And, just being able to touch them in a way positively that will help the trajectory of their academic career moving forward is just so amazing for me.
Well, even just, aside from all the information and those types of the things that you're teaching, which is amazing. I don't even know about half the things you're talking about either, or as much of knowledge as I have. But in terms of like the skills, like research skills, knowing how to like not only like what is a credible source, how do you find quality information, because we are in such a day and age right now where there is a lot of misinformation, and that is like at the root. Like I've talked to adults that like I'm in a debate with an adult, and literally they're sending me, oh, well, read this article, this says this, and I'm like
it's like The Onion.
I'm like, my man, this is a blog, this is not a credible source, this is
an opinion.
This is an opinion. Exactly. So I think there is, and I think that's been in essence one of the problems with our society today, is that exactly where there is so much. We are in the information age, which is fantastic. You can find any sort of information you want at the click of a button. Just the skill-based stuff, being able to sort of recognize like, what's a good source and what is proper research takes skills. It takes time to understand that. And I think a lot of adults don't know it. So if you can teach that at a younger younger grade, I mean, that's in younger age, that's even better. So that way they know what they're doing, what they're talking about. And then the ability to debate too, that's a skill. Like to be able to back your argument up with evidence, right? I mean, that's like, any high school student hearing this right now is probably getting triggered, but like it's important stuff. It really is.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting how much they benefit from this type of learning because they're not getting all of this information in their own schools. I mean, they're not getting negotiation skills at school. They're not getting interpersonal relationship building skills at school. They're not getting policy development skills at school. I mean, that's something that you really think about in the higher education realm. But to give these kids an opportunity to develop that interest so young will just make them 10 times more equipped to handle it when they are on the real world stage.
For sure. Absolutely. I think that's a great point. And like I said earlier, I think the younger the better in terms of with some of these things. I mean, I think there's a certain age where that caps. I think maybe I think 10 is a good age to start teaching them these things, but they can't get to me and not know how to research and not how to know how to, do all these kind of these basic level things, so that way they can get to, high school and be able to do an annotated bibliography and do a proper research paper, but not, or even smaller than that, just developing a solid argument, right? A concise argument that makes sense and that's rooted in factual information and where to find that information. It's all very important. I'm really glad that you, especially as a musician and as an artist, are taking the time to do that. So from educators everywhere, we thank you. Because people like you are definitely helping us out. No question about it.
Absolutely. That's what I love.
Yeah, no doubt. And so specifically, what does your class kind of look like? I know it's online right now, but how has that kind of been sort of having to teach online?
Oh, so actually, I was more so teaching full-time over the summer.
Oh, okay.
And in the past months, last semester and this semester, what we've been doing is hosting online conferences to facilitate the debates that these kids are going to. So basically in the summer program, I was teaching online. It was pretty challenging, just kind of dipping my feet in the water in that way. But I also think that it helped me develop more pedagogical skills that would have kind of been involved with more anxiety had I been in person in front of those kids, you know what I mean? So I think it was an easier transition in a sense, even though it was harder to keep them engaged. So it's really give or take. There's different things that you just have to kind of know to do, like throwing a game or an activity in the middle of a really long lecture, just kind of getting them to want to respond again after being silent for 2 hours can be a huge challenge. And now with these online conferences that we're hosting, obviously it's a competition, it's kind of to build your competitive edge, but it still has definitely an air of being educational and kind of holding their hand along the way if they do need the help and being there as a resource rather than as a critic. And I think that is a really good line to draw as well, especially in an online space. There's a thing called Zoom fatigue. I'm sure we've all been having it, especially if you're a student and a teacher at the same time. So I understand exactly where they're coming from because I'm also going through the same exact things. So I just try to think what I would want if I was a student at their age during a Zoom lecture that I think is going on for way too long. Maybe I want something to, spice it up a little bit.
For sure. The musician thing I think is going to work out for you, but lo and behold, if it doesn't, I think you have a great future in education. I would, if like I said, if the music thing doesn't work out, totally strive for that.
Thank you.
No, I really do. I think you got a great mind for it, and you're really, you know what you're talking about. And even though you haven't, I have a master's in this stuff, and for you to not have any sort of pedagogical experience, and
I have no formal training.
You have a good understanding of what makes these kids tick. But I think that's the important thing is they recognize that you're there to make that relationship, right? My brother does something similar. He works for IDA Math, and it's very similar. He has no experience teaching either, but it's a program where for kids that are more higher achieving in math and science. And it's the same thing. I can hear him even on some of his Zoom calls. He's probably gonna kill me for saying this on air, but just I hear him talking to his students and that good rapport and that good nature. It's so important these days that these kids, as you said, look at you as I think a resource is a good word that you said, and because I think a lot of young kids, and I think I both of us probably grew up this way, but sort of seeing our teachers as critics, like you said, like, oh, am I right about this or am I wrong? And that's not the point, right? Like, I mean,
No.
and that's what I think what we're starting to get away from, but you already have that down. So, hey, I don't know.
Thank you.
If like I said, music thing, if it doesn't shape up for you, I think you got a bright future in education. But you definitely got a bright future in music, and I want to get to that in just a second. But my last question on this topic is, you are very passionate about world issues, as I can tell, and some of the things in my research I was looking on you. I know how to do my research as well.
Of course.
You're very passionate about climate change and natural disasters, amongst some of the other topics you were mentioning, like racial or gender violence in other countries and things of that nature. So, talk to me about maybe a few of these world issues that you're like really passionate about, and sort of what your aim is to maybe raise awareness or change some of these things. Because these are very complex issues, but there are things we can do, small things we can do every day to change some of them. But so tell me a little bit about like I said, a few world issues you're very passionate about and how you're sort of navigating that.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking about that. I think one of the biggest issues that especially people in my generation, your generation, are going to be facing is the issue of sustainability. I think a lot of people are kind of starting to wake up to the fact that we don't have hundreds of years left of living in the way that we're living. We barely have probably another century like this. So we really need to kind of hunker down as a society and hold people at the top accountable. I think accountability is the number one buzzword for this topic. Everyone wants to speak about holding yourself personally accountable, and I think that's extremely important to a degree if you can influence yourself, your family, your friends around you. But it's also about holding corporations accountable in the way that they developed products. And in doing so, I mean, there's a lot of power in your finances and where you're putting them. So not supporting companies that aren't acting sustainably, not supporting companies that are doing things that are bad for the environment. I think the power of the consumer is almost greater than our power as individually becoming more sustainable. I think they're important to do simultaneously, but if we're not necessarily putting our money where our mouth is and doing little things like cutting out single-use plastics, but at the same time we're still supporting fast fashion, you're not getting to the root of the problem mentally and psychologically. And I think people want to feel instantly gratified by using a paper straw instead of, making the long-term commitment to avoiding some corporations that might never change their sustainability practices. And I know I'm not perfect. Like, I still shop at fast fashion locations from time to time, but I'm actively trying to incorporate more secondhand garments into my wardrobe, items that will have more longevity, things that don't fall apart at the seams. And I think another problem is, in the fashion industry, clothing is made to such a low standard of wearability that within a season, things will either go out of fashion or break down to the point that you can no longer use them. So it's a multi-layered issue, but I think it really starts with holding the companies that make these products accountable.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting you say that because I was watching, this was a little while ago, so I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but I was really fascinated by Hassan Minash's Patriot Act on Netflix, because he talks a lot about some of these issues in more of a, I guess, relatable or digestible fashion. But he was mentioning, I think he had an episode exactly on what you're talking about, fast fashion. And I remember there was like this astronomical amount of water that we don't even realize that like it actually takes to make clothing. Like I didn't even think about it. I think it was like hundreds of gallons of water for like only like a handful of shirts or something crazy like that.
Yeah.
I don't want to get my numbers wrong, but I encourage people to I need to do more. As you're talking, I'm drinking a freaking plastic bottle. Like you're right. But these things we don't think about.
It's subconscious.
It's subconscious at this point, right? Like. I did fill this up, I swear. But like either way,
that's
like,
fair. That's fair. And like honestly, I don't think the judgment should be necessarily placed on the individual. That's not to say take your hands off the wheel and don't care. Right. Like still recycle, still try to take public transportation if you can. Like reduce your use of single-use items. But at the same time, like we have to think about it as a societal and governmental issue, because individuals, while we can create grassroots movements to pressure corporations, we don't physically have the manpower to make the kind of changes that we need to make as rapidly as we need to make them.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's another documentary I watched recently, the most recent David Attenborough one, A Life on Our Planet, which I just blew my mind in so many ways. And he's, again, alluding to a lot of the things. I mean, he's spent a lifetime, you know, dedicating himself to these types of issues. And one of the things, like, I was dumbfounded after watching that, because I think he had said something like, maybe we'll get another 70 to 100 years living the way we are. Like, if that, like, it might not even be that long. And, you know, not to scare anybody, but the urgency is there. And I think we're at that point. If you're not kind of on board with the climate change thing right now, I don't know, you might be getting left behind with that. Like, it's a thing. It's here. It's happening. I agree. I think that we even just today we had a meeting after school. I was telling you a little bit about how crazy my Monday's been too, but we had a faculty meeting after school, and actually a lot of the meeting we were talking about, students were actually presenting this, and I was really fascinated by this. They're presenting a charging station, potentially, or a couple of charging stations, and the urgency to maybe try to get people to, not only the people that are already driving cars that are sustainable on electricity and energy, but maybe encouraging more people to invest in cars that are, you know, that run on electric, even if it's a little bit more difficult to find a charging station, right? Like, I think things like that, if we make them more readily accessible, like something as simple as that. I mean, if we can take one gas car off the road, it'll help. It's something, you know what I mean? We're losing those emissions, you know. But again, you're right. It's hard because it is a lot of it. I mean, up to the consumer, it can be up, but it's past that as well. And a lot of these places, a lot of these corporations, it's a money machine. It's you know, just the capitalism of America is how it's, not to say that it's wrong necessarily, but there needs to be a fine line there. We need to figure out, because if we can't sustain ourselves, then nobody's going to be on this planet at some point. And
the money in the world can't buy a new planet. That's really what it comes down to.
No, we can't.
And I mean, I think if consumers like dedicate themselves as a base to kind of pressure corporations, at least one way or another, even if it's not out of the kindness of their hearts, it'll be out of the kindness of their wallets, that they'll want to bend to the will of the consumer one way or another.
Yep. And something fascinating in that documentary too that I'm just thinking about that he was mentioning was the Earth. Like, the Earth won't necessarily go away. Like, it was almost like he was using this analogy of like we're almost cancerous to the Earth, where it's like it's going to be unsustainable for us to live on, and eventually the Earth will like heal itself. We're literally not killing the planet, but we are, you know, making it unsustainable for ourselves, and eventually the planet will heal because it's been here for however long it's been. And there was another interesting thing. I think it was Chernobyl. At the very end of that documentary, if anyone's not seen it, where Chernobyl, it was like around 40 years ago, had that crazy explosion and people had to evacuate, and because of the power plant. And he went back there now, and there's actually all this wildlife and vegetation all of a sudden, 40 years later, like embedded into all of the rubble, which is unbelievable to like think about and to see that. It was like, because I've always thought, like, when I've heard Chernobyl, I've always thought of the destruction, but never really thought about what it's like now. And
the regrowth.
And there is regrowth there, exactly. So what does that say? It says that, you know, this Earth will be here long after we're gone, whether we're here or not, like whether the human race is here or not. So it's
that's true, and that's something that's really hard to kind of accept. Because I think as like a self-aware species, we oftentimes feel like the world was created for us. But we just kind of got lucky and ended up here, so we need to take care of it.
Yep. It's not like Matthew McConaughey's Interstellar, where we can just go find another planet that's inhabitable. So it's not going to happen.
That movie is so sad.
That movie is sad. Isn't it really sad?
It's really depressing.
It's really depressing, yeah. One of his better acting jobs, in my opinion, but definitely.
Yeah.
And I love Christopher Nolan, but we're getting too off topic. I definitely want to talk. We've been talking. Listen, this has been amazing, by the way, because we've been the music podcast. We haven't spoken a word about your music yet, because you're doing so many amazing things.
I know. We need to get back to the music.
The music. I know. We gotta. Maybe we'll fit in a little bit of music here. Maybe just a little bit. We are the Turntable teachers, though, so educational things like this are obviously important. Past that, but you're here to obviously talk about some of your music, which just as impressive of a resume as your college resume and what you're doing outside of that, and just your life. You've had some singles that have done numbers, my friend. Oh my goodness, you have some songs that are just going crazy right now. Whether the videos are hitting 1 million streams on or views, on YouTube, or some of the songs that are getting hundreds of thousands of plays on Spotify and things of that nature. I mean, I guess I'll start first with your latest single, Cherry on Top, which I really, actually the first song that I heard of yours and I'm really enjoying a lot. Describe to me the creative process of this song and what inspired you, and then of course the reaction that you've received from it now that it's hit the airwaves and doing really great things right now.
I'm trying to see if we can get closer. Baby, tell me I'm the cherry on top. Got the sugar, gonna make your teeth rot. I'm a treat, you wanna eat me all up. When I'm melting, it's too sweet, you can't stop.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it was a super fun song for me to make. I actually wrote it towards the end of quarantine, beginning of the summer, and I was collaborating with my producer, Trackdilla, who produced the track. He's an incredible artist himself, incredible producer. He's worked with Post Malone, Tyga, a bunch of other artists. So he's super well renowned around the Los Angeles, Hollywood area, just kind of in the music industry overall. So it's been a pleasure to work with him, and he's kind of served as an industry mentor for me as well. So I've loved working with him. That collaborative process was pretty much all remote, just given the nature of the situation we were in at the time. But I did get a chance to meet him in September or October, I believe, when I did relocate to Los Angeles. So that was awesome as well. The song itself had a really ridiculous kind of origin story. He sent me a bunch of different tracks to listen to. I chose that one, loved it, immediately kind of came up with this melody idea, didn't know what the title would be yet or anything like that, but I did take this photo of myself, and I had half blonde, half pink hair that I dyed myself over quarantine, because why not? And I had brown roots growing in the top, and I photoshopped a little cherry on my head because to me I looked like Neapolitan ice cream, because it was like pink, brown, and blonde. And I was like, okay, like I was feeling the little ice cream vibe. Okay. So then I was like, cherry on top, and that picture inspired the title.
That's awesome. Wow. Your hairdo, of all things, or not.
I know. I mean, I'm
funny.
a very visual person. I'm a visual learner, visual creator. So having that like photograph influence the title kind of took the rest of the trajectory of the song. Like, it has ice cream references. It's very sweet, sugary, but it also has a lot of double entendres. So it's very fun.
Well, I think a lot. Yeah. Well, not to jump to another song, but first of all, that's a great story. I love that story of the cherry on top and things like that. But I think a lot of your songs have that sort of feel like very centered around some kind of topic that can be interpreted as maybe something fun, but then also something a little bit deeper as well. Like you have, of course, Trick or Treat and songs like FaceTime. What's been like a song for you that has been one of your favorites to do so far in your very early career, of course?
I think Trick or Treat was really fun for me because it was the first song that I ever completely self-produced.
Oh, wow.
So I've, been learning how to use Logic, how to just work in that digital audio workspace, how to mix and master. I'm starting that process between this semester and next semester with different classes. But really, I've grown a lot as a producer in the past 2 years here at school. And that's been an incredible asset for me, especially as a songwriter, because now I feel like I can truly pull out the sounds that I want to pull out when I'm writing my music. And it just highlights everything that I want to hear. It's a lot easier than kind of telling someone, well, I want something that goes like, do-do-do-do-do. Like, that's just so much harder than just getting it yourself and knowing how to find those sounds. So, that was a huge accomplishment for me, just fully self-producing, just writing that entire song. I would say I write like 98% of all my music, unless it's like fully a collaboration. But the production side of things is something I've always had someone come on board for. So it's awesome that I was able to do everything start to finish on that track. And then as well, the video, I co-produced with my mom. She directed it. We sourced all the wardrobe ourselves. My best friends were in the video. So it was definitely all hands on deck, kind of do-it-yourself experience, and that was amazing for me too, to just take ownership of my art, and really put forward the vision that I wanted for that video.
Beautiful. And I love that because you were, like you said, you were able to put everything that you wanted incorporated into that. There was like, you got the full autonomy of that. And that's, I think, amazing, especially in the industry that is the music industry, that can be a little bit not like that all the time. I'll just put it that way. One of our past guest speaker episodes with TJ Hickey, we talked a lot about that. So if you want to hear some, I would say bashing of the music industry, but maybe just music industry conversation, go check that out, that previous episode in our catalog. But either way, another great song as well, Trick or Treat especially. I really enjoy that. Again, I like the quirkiness and sort of the just the cool attitude you put into your music, and the charisma, I guess, is the best word, not attitude. Charisma, I think is the best word to describe it, and it really kind of comes off in your music. And also, I'm very happy to hear that you're able to utilize what you're learning in school and apply it to your creative process. That's amazing. And
that's definitely a higher education element, I'll say that,
for sure.
to say the least.
For sure, no question.
A lot more direct transfer from education to life.
You got it.
But it's been amazing because I feel like some things were kind of refreshers for my time in high school, because I did go to a performing arts high school. So I majored in classical piano and jazz guitar, while still kind of songwriting on the side and being in a rock band at the same time. It was a lot. I've always had a lot going on, I will say. But then by the time I graduated, I was like, no, I really want to focus on songwriting, production, pop music, just kind of like going in one direction and sticking to it. And that's been incredibly fruitful for me, just having that focus and having all the classes around me really add to that.
It's beautiful. I love it. You're saying a lot of amazing things. And I guess this would be a sort of a teaching pedagogy. I can't believe I'm asking this question about 40 minutes into this interview, roughly 30 minutes into this interview. But we will call this backwards pedagogy, or UDL is what we call this in teaching. But I want to talk about your early stages in your career, and not only your early stages in your career, but early stages of your life with music, because it sounds to me like you have some parents that are not only very supportive of your music career, but they had maybe one of their own even, or they've been involved. So, tell me like your early life with music, how did you sort of get into, I guess a passion of creating music, and where does that all kind of stem from?
Yeah, so my parents both worked in the industry. My mom worked for Sony for several years. My dad ran a label for reggaeton hip-hop artists. So he's just they both danced around the entertainment industry for a long time, but they actually kind of left the industry, and I dragged them back into it when they moved on to other things. So I was like, no, we're gonna revisit this.
Time
Hold
out.
on.
We're gonna give you back over here.
Yeah, but I was never really expected to do music. It was just kind of whatever I wanted to explore, but I fell in love with it from literally birth, pretty much. I would start singing around the house when I was 2 or 3. I started piano lessons when I was 3, guitar when I was 9, and then ended up at a performing arts high school, picking up a couple other instruments along the way, just on the side, kind of experimenting. So I have always had this great love of music, and it's really just been bolstered by my parents, not really influenced by them. Okay. So they've shown me a lot of amazing classics. I grew up listening to Prince, Michael Jackson, Cher, just amazing artists. So I always kind of knew the good stuff. And then my mom also has a background in loving punk rock and grunge music, and I grew up loving post-hardcore and heavy metal, so I have a lot of that dichotomy as well. Even though I'm a pop artist, I still have a great love and appreciation for so many other genres, so that's been a huge asset for me. Also, knowing the ins and outs of different genres, even having that experience as a jazz guitarist has influenced me in writing, kind of diversifying my musical language when I'm writing songs.
That's a great answer too, first of all, and so it's really cool that your parents you dragged them back into things. I love
I did.
Yeah. They were probably
kicking and screaming.
I need to get out of this industry, and then you're like, hold that thought. Hold that
yeah
thought.
They were out for 10 years and then it was over.
That's so great. I love it. But that's really cool that they didn't necessarily force you to do anything. You just kind of were you just really just enamored with it, and that just again shows your passion for it.
It was like a happy accident.
That's good though. It's good, and it's very coincidental that they were in the industry for so long, and then all of a sudden that happened. So are they musically inclined, or are they just more or less like, are they just in the industry? Because you said
they were both like very much on the business side of things.
Okay, so not really like creative side.
My mom actually has a lot of vocal training, but she never really wanted to like be an artist in the industry.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, I'm the first instrumentalist in the family.
Love it. Very good. Yeah, you play quite a few instruments, which is awesome too, and that's I think that's just good for you to get that experience early on and be around it, and now you're learning again like mixing and mastering and the engineering side of things, of producing. That's awesome. The do-it-yourself thing is really, I think, important, especially in the day and age, because you're going to save yourself a boatload of money on sending it out to get mixed and mastered, or whatever else like that. Like that's just, it's good that you can do it in house. And use your skill sets that you've grown up with, basically. I mean, you were born for this.
Thank you.
It's awesome. And I love the musical influences too, with Prince and Cher and Michael Jackson. Like I had a mother the same thing where, of course, as people are looking at my wall, I definitely like my fair share of hip hop.
I love hip hop. I love hip hop. It's my favorite genre to listen to.
Yeah. I can tell by your music that you definitely dabble into hip hop and that you enjoy hip hop. But I grew up on like Fleetwood Mac. I grew up on Luther Vandross. Elton.
Ooh, yes.
Elton John was a big one in my household. We loved Elton John around here. And then I definitely got into the grunge stuff too, because my mom was into it. Like she was really into Pearl Jam. She loved Collective Soul was another one. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. They were great. I used to listen to them all the time back as a kid. But and I think that's and then I got into hip hop. I kind of went down that field, but I always have that kind of grassroots as well, where I always have to go back to that stuff every once in a while, even though I do love hip hop. But I'm definitely got to go back to some of that stuff. Prince is excellent, at least.
Yeah, he's just such a well-rounded musician. It's insane.
It really is. It's unbelievable. I'll never forget his halftime show, Pouring Rain, Super Bowl. Like just shredding the guitar. Like this dude is unbelievable. What hip hop artists are you into? Like who are you listening to right now? Like what's if I was going your Spotify or Apple Music, what are you listening to? What's in rotation?
I love Amine. He's definitely my favorite artist.
He's great.
I'm actually wearing merch sweatpants from him right now.
I know exactly. Are they the ones from the previous album, the green ones?
They're Limbo from his most recent. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they're the new design where it looks like the Range Rover logo, but it says Limbo Rover.
Sweet.
I wonder if there's some like copyright issues with that, but it's a great logo, so I'm living for it. I also have a Limbo sticker on my laptop, which is kind of funny, but I think he's an incredible artist just because his visual branding is so specific to who he is and how he's also comedic as a rapper. And I think that shines through all of his videos, all of his lyrics, just his persona overall. He seems like someone you would run into like at a supermarket and like have a hilarious conversation with. Like he doesn't seem like the type of person who would be like too cool to be seen with you. You know what I mean? So I think that shines through a lot in his work. And one thing I really admire about his videos is that he's self-directed a lot of them, and he includes all of his best friends from childhood and like later in life also in his videos. So I think that's really cool.
And you do the same thing, so that's
I do the same thing.
Yeah, awesome. That's great. No, I will admittedly say that until Limbo, I wasn't really like super into his music, but there was definitely songs on that album that I really enjoyed. Like I'm a huge, like I love Slow Tie, I love Denzel Curry, so like those types of artists that that he was working with on that project, I definitely got behind. And he's one that I don't think a lot of like doesn't get as much recognition as he necessarily deserves either, right? He's not like super in the limelight. He's not like, I mean, if you're an underground, if you're a hip hop fan, like a kid, if you're for the culture, Amine, right? I mean, it's not, but there's not really, in terms of like radio and mainstream, he's not like super in that light quite yet. But yeah,
it's interesting to me because he is so incredibly popping off on social media, and like he kind of made the crossover from like underground to like more mainstream, I say, in the past 2 years, because I've been listening to him since 2017. So I kind of like saw the come up, which was cool to see.
It is cool to see that.
And like he was featured as like one of Vivo's breakout artists of like 2018 or 2019, and that also like pushed him more into the spotlight. I just think really the thing is that a lot of artists like that are really in the mainstream in hip hop right now have a very similar style, and he's a little more like different than what is happening right now, but I think his music is so amazing. It's like kind of living in its own space, which in and of itself is becoming an asset, because I think he's getting more of a fan base for being a little different. And
in this oversaturated just
market
exactly, like that is to have something proprietary like that when you hear it you're like, oh, that's,
you know, it's him.
That's him, or that's this artist, or this, like, that is huge to not have to sound like, again, hear the cookie cutter stuff that's all out there. You know what I mean? You want that.
Exactly. I also think Ash Nico is another artist that's kind of doing that in, I guess, like the alternative pop trap lane. I'm not really sure how to categorize her, to be honest. But she had a breakout TikTok hit, Daisy, and that song really like just catapulted her to the forefront of more of a mainstream. But her visuals are so alternative and dark and graphic, and I think that's something that really sets her apart in an awesome way, because you don't want to see copies of the same type of artist, and I think this next generation of artists are really thinking outside the box with their branding, and that's something that I really love to see.
That's huge. Is that something that you focus on? Like, is there something you think about a lot, is like your branding and things of that nature?
Yeah, I think it's just important to have something that's distinctly yours, whether that's a niche musically or visually, or something that you love to do that you want to share with people. I think all of those things are super important in defining a career.
Definitely.
For sure.
I agree. I think any opportunity you can get to stand out and make yourself like kind of separate from a pack is very important, and especially, like I said, in this day and age where there's a lot of definitely a lot of oversaturation in a lot of things. That's awesome. I love that answer. I thought a lot of great artists there. And who was the last one you had mentioned though? Because I haven't heard of her. I'm gonna have to check her.
Ash Nico. ASHNIKKO.
I'm gonna have to. That's my homework after this, is to check out some Ash Nico, because I'm not familiar with her work. And then that's a beautiful thing too. Like, there's so much out there, right? Again, this is coming from the music head. Doesn't know who Ash Nico is. There's probably people listening to this right now thinking like, what do you mean you've never heard of that person? I love that. My co-host and I, when we do music reviews, we laugh, because when he had this actually really funny bit where he said, he's like, the music head in me was, again, so thankful that you put me on to this artist. I think I put him on to, the song was like Lucky Day and Tiana Major 9 on Red. I don't know if you're familiar with either of them. And he was like, the music critic in me was excited that you put me onto this, but the music head in me is pissed that I didn't find it myself, so it's like it's
No, exactly. I love discovering music and new artists. I have an entire playlist called Current Creators, and it's literally just like up and coming singer-songwriters, pop artists, hip-hop artists. Like, I love finding people like that. I have like a little bit of A&R in me, I would say.
There you go. Hey, well, I think you get that too as well from your folks, for sure. I think that there's definitely some of that in there, no doubt.
Absolutely.
No question. So I wanted to also just a couple other questions for you. I definitely wanted to talk about your recent interview on Fox 5. So a little bit higher up, I would say, than the Turntable Teachers, where you're on now. But,
oh, no.
Or in terms of popularity, I mean, we're not Fox, but what was it like for you? Of course, this is pre-recorded, so there's no pressure. But what was it like for you? I was even seeing the video of you beforehand. You were like, oh my God, I'm about to go on live TV. They told me it was 7:12 or whatever it was. It's 7:10 or I don't remember exactly off the top of my head. But I was cracking up laughing.
It was 2 minutes late, and I was so nervous.
You were probably it's the worst.
I kept refreshing and refreshing.
Longest 2 minutes of your life, probably, right? I'm supposed to go on.
And I was like, am I ready? Is my hair okay? Is this happening? It was just crazy. But
crazy. Yeah.
It was definitely surreal to think about this is live TV. This is actual television, and with the internet, it can feel a little bit of a divide between something going on YouTube or Instagram or social media, something that I could do myself versus TV. I don't have access to just put something on TV myself. So it's it's another level of almost like verification, and I'm like, oh wow, that's like a boundary that I've kind of like just crossed, and it was crazy. It was really cool. And it was also so quick.
Yeah.
Like literally the segment was like 5 minutes, and I was like, whoa, I felt like I had whiplash. I was like, okay, that's it, cool. I was like, I hope my answers were good enough, thanks. But it was a lot of fun, and my interviewer Jason was awesome. Lots of energy, like it was super exciting and positive.
Yeah, it seemed that way, and it feels so. Was it? Just to refresh my memory, was it like it was a local Fox news station, I believe. Was it in Nevada? Is that correct? Is that where you're from?
It was in Las Vegas. Yeah, I'm not from Las Vegas, but
okay.
They ended up being interested in featuring me on the show just because they've seen the music videos kind of like blowing up, and they were like, oh, this would be super cool, just like a little 5-minute segment. So then they put me on.
I wasn't sure if like you were from that area or something like that, and they made it kind of almost seem that way. They're like, oh, this is like an artist or up and coming artist from. I thought they had said from the area, but I guess not. Where did you grow up around the LA area? Like, where'd you grow up originally?
I actually grew up in the Poconos in Pennsylvania. Oh
wow! Oh, so you're out East Coast then? Oh, out here.
Yeah,
oh, okay. You're an East Coast girl.
I'm an East Coast girl.
Okay.
But I've fallen in love with Los Angeles, but I'll never betray New York City. Like New York City is my birthplace. It's my number one girl. Like I've always been a New York girl, and I see myself living there at some point. I know LA is like where my career is taking me right now, and I love the city. I cannot wait to move there. But I see myself settling in New York for a time.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. So well, you're going to school on the East Coast, so I guess you are traditionally an East Coast girl. You'll make your way back here eventually. You do your thing in LA for sure. I think that's great, and you'll get back out here soon. Of course. We're obviously an East Coast based podcast. We're Massachusetts, but a little bit of a clash with New York every once in a while. But here and there.
We're not going to talk about sports because then it's going to get ugly. We don't need to talk about it.
It's okay. Yeah, I don't even need to know your affiliations because I'm sure they're not close to mine, and I don't think anyone that's not from the New England area doesn't want to hear us talk about sports.
Yeah, there's no such thing.
Yeah, because I've been spoiled. Being the age I'm 27, so I've lived through quite a few championships and nobody needs to hear any more of that. So people are finally happy that we're losing. Like all of our sports teams kind of stink this year. So.
Rip Brady. That's all I have to say.
My heart, it hurts every time. It hurts every time. It was so tough.
He came to Florida of all places.
Florida. He went to Florida. I was stunned.
If you were him, of course you'd want to come live in beautiful sunny Florida.
I would have done it 10 years ago.
Okay.
I would have done it. I would have done it 10 years before he did. So I don't blame him for what he did. I'm not one of these people that's out here fuck Brady. That's not me. It's not me at all. I'm happy with what he's doing, obviously, but it's just sad for me. That's all. It's just a little depressing. That's all. But no
I
one
get
feels
it.
bad for me, so it's fine.
Definitely a change.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, maybe I'm a little resistant to change. Who knows? But we think we all are just a little bit in our own way, no doubt. So one of my last questions I have for you before my final big question that I ask every artist that comes on this show. It's always my favorite one to ask, but I totally want to talk to you a little bit too about, what else you maybe want your fans and your audience to know about you, or overall, what's going to be, I know you're early on in your career right now, but do you think about long-term, legacy things, what you want ultimately, what message you want to send with your music, or what, ideas you want to convey during your time as a musician?
Absolutely. I think one of my biggest long-term goals is to work in a similar way that Leonardo DiCaprio has with his platform. Like we were talking about earlier, climate change and sustainability is something that's super important to me. And I would like to start a nonprofit at some point in my career, wherever it feels right, that really touches upon the intersection between sustainability and the music industry. And I think that's a conversation that not many people are focusing on. Obviously, the music industry is very entertainment based, so we're here to entertain the masses, we're here to produce content, we're here to work on new material, but I think it's also important to kind of think about the longevity of this as an industry. Not only marketing wise and like digitally, how technology is changing things, but also on the ground, like how are concerts being held? How can they reduce their electricity usage? How can they reduce their use of single-use plastics? On a world tour, think about how many things are thrown away from concessions.
So true.
Think about packaging of merchandise from artists on tour. I mean, these are things that aren't really being discussed or cared about as much as I think that they should be. And, it's important to hold industries responsible and not just point the finger, but also provide solutions. So that's kind of where I want to kind of step in at some point in my career, where it feels right and purposeful to do so.
Yeah, I was even considering something like that, where like if you're at a venue, how many like plastic cups are being thrown away, like just from concessions or drinks. Like, I mean, you could even take that into the entertainment industry as a whole, like not even music. You could talk about that with sports.
Movie theaters, anything, sports events.
All of it. No, you said it definitely begs the question in the conversation, and not something that I don't think a lot of people consider. Not something I consider when I go to a concert. That's for damn sure. So it's certainly, and I'm glad that you're, even at the age you're at and where you're at in your life, you're thinking about these things. It's really important, and that's a profound thing, that you're very wise beyond your years. I definitely will give you that, no question. Of course, so you're doing a really amazing job with your platform, and I think you're doing a great job of also entertaining, but also trying to get some of these things, some of these changes that are necessary, right? And I think that overall, I think for you, I think you would probably agree with this, but if you were able to change something like that in the industry, I think that would be more important than any song you ever put out. And if people remembered you for that, that's a proprietary thing that a lot of people would get behind, I think, especially if that's like really a direction you want to go. So huge props. I wish you nothing but the best in that endeavor. I think we're going to be looking back in a couple of years and looking at something like that with and you're going to be a huge part of it. So just congratulations with everything you've been doing, and keep moving forward. I'm very impressed. Very impressed.
Oh, thank you so much.
And I think everybody listening to this right now for sure is as well. And I'm so glad that you care about bigger issues. I think a lot of artists do care about a lot of bigger issues. I don't think it's necessarily like that they don't. But maybe like this specific issue isn't one that's being talked about, right? There's a lot of racial and social issues that are being talked about in music, and that's great. I'm glad. Which
are absolutely important, and I think that's amazing that artists are finally kind of using their platform for those issues as well. I think that is literally so important and something that hasn't been addressed before, at least not to this scale.
Yeah, and that is, I think, and especially with this pandemic, like I think understood like how important our artists are, like whether they're on the indie level and they just have a couple hundred listeners, or where you're at where you have a couple 100,000 listeners, or somebody on Drake's level that has millions. It's like you need to, these are things that we can't really these are things that we can't necessarily ignore anymore, right? Like they've been, I mean, so many artists have tried to talk about this for so long, even in the hip hop. I mean, look at NWA. Like they were talking about this stuff in the 80s when like in LA, where there was deep-seated issues with police brutality, and this is not a new conversation, right? A lot of these social and racial issues they're not new, and it's important to have them, but of course there's other issues in the world that we have to talk about as well.
I recently saw a graphic where I can't quote the exact numbers, but it said something like being an artist is like one of the top 5 like most popular non-essential jobs. And I was interested in that because they had to hire a graphic artist to make the graphic. So you can't really say that something like art is non-essential when it's a huge part of our daily lives. It's something we consume at every waking moment. Whether we're looking at social media and we see graphic art, graphics, something going on the news, an artist had to design, the color scheme or the text that was going on the screen. Exactly. Art is literally integrated in everything we do. So I also think that there's like a cultural shift from seeing art as something that we shy away from encouraging kids to do into being seen as a more viable profession long term. And I think that's something that's really great to look forward to.
I think so too. And I completely agree, because I think, and I was telling you a little bit off air, I think that there's this sort of push for kids to really go to college, right? And I'm not sitting here suggesting that college is not a good thing. It did a lot of good things for me. It's clearly doing a lot of good things for you. But that might not be the avenue for everybody, right? There's so many other avenues and so many other things that we could be encouraging our kids to go do. Like, to ask a 17, 18-year-old kid what they want to do with the rest of their lives, that's a huge, huge question. And I always tell my students, follow a passion of something you care about. And oftentimes it does have something to do with some form of creative, nature or art or anything like that. And we need to, or even as a side hustle or things like that. Like I have a student who makes unbelievable unbelievable graphic design for like athletes, to the point where like the NFL was reaching out to him. I'm not kidding. This is a crazy story.
Wow.
The NFL was reaching out to him and he couldn't take the job because he wasn't 18.
Oh,
like,
my
isn't that crazy?
gosh.
So they're reaching
Wow.
out. They're like, hey, like, this is amazing. Like, we'd love for you to work for us, blah, blah, blah. And he's like going through the process and they're like, oh, you're only 16. Like, we can't hire you. We need to be 18. So it's just like things like that where, and I've been telling him, I'm like, yo, push that. Like, keep going. Like, that's amazing.
That's a calling. Like, that's someone to definitely call back in 2 years.
Exactly.
Like, don't forget about that contact.
Exactly.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So it's I think in this day and age, our kids, you're seeing it too. Like, our kids are very resilient. There's kids here that are in this world, that this day and age, this generation, they're resilient. I mean, they've gone through a pandemic. Granted, none of us have been through it, but we're a little bit older. That's a little bit, I think, in some ways easier for us to navigate. Kids, it's a lot harder in a lot of ways. And just to see a lot of them still trying to be creative and resilient. And I think them looking up to people like yourself as well. And I think your kids seeing that, like, hey, you can care about these issues and still do music. You can care about these issues and things in the world and still be an athlete. You can still be an artist. You can still, do graphic design. Whatever it is that you want to do as a passion, how can you also not only spin that in a way that makes sense culturally and to make, just better ourselves as humans, but that they don't have to necessarily be mutually exclusive. We can do them together, and that's an important thing I think our youth needs to realize, and I think they're getting it too. They can understand it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's marking a huge shift in how artists used to be seen,
Definitely.
in mainstream media, pretty much not allowed to have political opinions, not allowed to say these type of things about issues. So now I think with the rise of social media, that has been super pivotal in making that change happen.
Yeah. All the shut up and dribble nonsense. Right. And someone like Muhammad Ali, who went to prison for speaking out on things that like he believed, you know what I mean? And so like you said, there were pioneers that really like pushed ourselves, like someone like Muhammad Ali, that to allow us to have these conversations now in that way, to be socially acceptable. And I'm glad that they are, because if they weren't, I think we would definitely not be in as good of a place. And people that have the platforms and the followings that they can reach as many people about these issues, that's the, I guess at the end of the day, that is probably one of the most important things for sure. But listen, this has been an amazing conversation and very enlightening for me, for sure. I'm definitely going to be walking away from this with a lot to think about myself. And I'm sure a lot of people listening to this are as well. Jasmine Ortiz, you've been phenomenal on this episode. Thank you so much. You're not done quite yet, though. We'll consider this, to keep it in pedagogical teaching, since you know what you're doing. We'll consider this your exit ticket, if you will.
Okay. Oh my God! Wait, I've literally heard that from my manager. That is so funny.
That's awesome. That's too funny though. Exit tickets. That's often a pedagogical teaching thing that we often talk about anyway. But anyway.
Yes.
For anyone that's just coming on us for the first time, that's fan of Jasmine Ortiz, we do this thing over at the Turntable Teachers. We call it the dream song scenario. Every artist that comes on this show, we ask them if they could make a song with anybody, dead or alive, who would they have? And I'll give you some criteria here. You get a producer or two. Okay, so if you want like a combination of two producers, totally fine. You want a certain melody or like maybe a drum progression from another one, you can mix and match. And then you get 3 guest artists on that song. So it's your song featuring 3 guest artists, and they can be anyone, dead or alive. Some people come on here and they're like, I don't know how this would sound or how this would work all meshed together. It's not the point. It's the dream song scenario. You can do whatever it is you want. So you can take all the time you need. Jasmine Ortiz, if you were to make a song with any artist, dead or alive, you get 3 and a producer or 2. Who would be on that song?
Oh my gosh, that is so hard.
Not an easy question.
No, that is not an easy question at all. Okay, I think I got 1 or 2 producers. I think I would probably pull someone from Drake's production team because I think his sound is really cool and it's current. And then I would give it a little bit of a throwback vibe. I think if I could really choose Dead or Alive, I would have to pull out some classics here. I would have to pull out some Prince.
Awesome.
I mean, how could you have that option and not collab with Prince? I mean, throw Drake in there too. It's his producers.
Okay.
Let's throw him in there.
Prince and Drake.
I think Drake and Prince would be pretty dope. And then let's throw some Post Malone in there too.
Ooh. Yeah.
I feel like there'd be some cool little vibes going on. And then Prince and Post Malone, all 3 of us actually play guitar. We have some more instruments going on with Prince. Drake's gonna spit some, romantic R&B trap vibes. It's gonna be a moment. I think that could be really cool.
I think it'd be a chart-topping hit, no question. Anyone to see the revival of Prince and Drake just alone, right? I mean, don't even add the incorporation else. Just if anyone saw Prince and Drake, like, whoa, that would be.
It's like, whoa.
That would be pretty good. Yeah, we've heard Drake, we've heard Prince on this show, but never together. So that was a new one.
Okay, there we go.
I've heard them both used, but not together.
We're breaking the boundaries here.
Breaking boundaries.
That's what we're doing.
For sure. Yeah. Well, that's why. That's the beauty of the dream song scenario. So Jasmine Ortiz featuring Prince, Drake, and Post Malone with production from Drake's team, maybe someone like 40 or and definitely and Prince definitely can do production too. So he gets the double.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he gets double time on that one for sure. No doubt about it. Jasmine Ortiz, thank you so much for being here. This has been an amazing episode. Followers of ours, make sure you are newcomers to the show. Make sure you follow her and make sure you stream all of her songs, especially her newest single, Cherry on Top. It is linked in the description below of this episode. If you are listening on YouTube or watching on YouTube, I should say, make sure you hit that subscribe button for us, and it really helps us out. Also on podcast streaming services, Spotify, Apple, SoundCloud, and of course, follow us at Turntable Teachers on Instagram. And Jasmine, go ahead, plug away for our fans as well, so that way they can follow you and stay hip to everything you're doing.
All right, you can follow me on all social media platforms at I am Jasmine Ortiz, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. You can find my music on Spotify, Apple Music, Deezer, Tidal, all of the above. So please give me a follow, check it out. I have a new song coming out end of April. It'll be called Jaguar. So you guys are hearing it from me. I'm really excited about this upcoming track. We're filming a music video very soon, and I can't wait for you guys to see it.
Awesome. Turntable Teachers exclusive, Jaguar. It's coming soon. We'll be promoting it on our end for sure. It'll definitely make its way onto our playlist. I can only imagine that will happen. Thank you guys so much for being here, of course, as well. Make sure you hit up our website as well, www.turntableteachers.com. We got all the latest episodes, blogs, merch. You know the deal. And without further ado, thank you so much for being here, Jasmine. Your time has been amazing. You've enlightening me on so many different topics, and I just can't wait to see your growth from here. And you are officially a Turntable Teachers alumni, and we will be following you for sure from here on out. No question about that.
Oh, thank you so much, Mike. I had an amazing time with you tonight. Thanks for having me on the show, and thank you to all the listeners out there.
Awesome. Without further adu, I'm Mike, and this is Jasmine with the Turntable Teachers, and class is officially dismissed. Did you like that?
I love that.
Turn